Hey guys, it's Austin with Out Jeeping. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to install 12-hole injectors in your Jeep 4.0. Now these injectors I got here today, they're made by Bosch and I bought them through K Suspension. I'll post a link in the description below on where you can find them. So the injectors I got here today are going to be the 12-hole reman injectors. They run about 125 bucks. They also offer them brand new for $170. And the cool thing about K Suspension is they offer a lifetime warranty on their injectors. Now if you have a 99 and up 4.0, these basically just plug right into the existing wiring harness. Now if you have a 98 and down, you need to buy pigtails that come with it. Basically, it just adapts the electrical connection from here to your existing wiring harness on your Jeep. A few things that these injectors do is they atomize the fuel a little bit better. That way it results in better running, so you won't get as much stumbles. It'll run a lot smoother. And some people say that you get better miles per gallon city. We'll have to see that. I will be making a follow-up video on how these injectors perform in my Jeep, along with the bored out throttle body. So let's get started. Alright, so now that we're under the engine bay, we can see what we all have to do. There's a couple ways of going around on how to switch out your injectors. You could either leave the fuel rail in your Jeep and just try to squeeze them in that way, or you can remove the fuel rail from your Jeep. Basically just have to disconnect the fuel line that's over here, which requires a special tool. It's basically a quick disconnect adapter, so you have to have a tool to push in the prongs to pull it out. Another thing is I got this custom heat shield that prevents heat soak, so you guys probably won't have this. I'll try my best on getting all the parts since it's kind of covering most of it. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to remove the fuel rail from the Jeep so I can show you guys better on how to install them. First thing I'm going to do is this vacuum hose out of the way and then disconnect all the throttle cables. Next thing I'm going to do is remove this bracket that holds the throttle cables down to the intake manifold. It's got two little 10mm bolts. And then you got another one over here. Push this out of the way. Then we got another hose over here. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the shrouding. I actually have it tied into the fuel rail bolts, so that's also going to undo your fuel rail. So a few more 10mm bolts. Make sure you put these bolts in a safe place and you don't drop them down in the engine bay. Alright, so now with that heat shield out of the way, you can see the fuel rail right underneath it. And now we're just basically going to disconnect all the injectors from the wiring harness. You got a red clip normally from factory. Mine broken off, so they just easily pop off like that. Just going to disconnect that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is remove this fuel connection right here, and that way we can remove the whole entire fuel rail as one piece. If you haven't already, go and unbolt the fuel rail from the intake manifold. There's going to be 4 10mm bolts, 2 on this side and then 2 on the other. So we got this little safety clip. Basically just take a screwdriver, pop it off. Now I can use this quick disconnect tool. Cheaper ones like the one I have, they're going to be made out of plastic. Some of them are going to be made out of aluminum, which work a lot better because they don't bend and stuff. Make sure you put a rag under here so it catches all the fuel that comes out. If you recently ran your vehicle, I would go and actually take all the pressure out of the system with the Schrader valve right behind here. That way not a lot of fuel will spray out when you're disconnecting this. Once all the pressure's out, you can put the cap back on. That was actually the wrong size, so putting on the correct one will help a lot. There we go. So now when removing the fuel rail, put one hand over here and another over here, and you want to pull evenly across all injectors. Do a little wiggling. And then you can remove your fuel rail. Watch out for any more gas that might pop out. Alright, so now with the fuel rail out, we can take the old injectors off the fuel rail and then put the new ones on. Now on this fuel rail, they have safety clips to hold the injectors on place. So we basically just have to take a screwdriver, go on the back side, and then pry them off. So now with all those clips off, we can carefully remove the injectors. They have an O-ring holding them in. So give it a little bit of twisting, and they should pop free. Alright, so with all the old injectors removed, I found it a little bit easier to use some WD-40 just to spray it in there to lube up the O-ring so it comes out a lot nicer. But with all of them out right now, I'm going to be taking a little paper towel and just basically cleaning out the inside because you don't want any dirt in here. If you have any dirt in here, it could run a possible leak from the O-ring not seating properly. So I'm just going in here, cleaning off all the gunk, whatever that could drop in there. Alright, so after all that is cleaned out, now I'm just going to be taking a little bit of WD-40 and squirting it in each hole and making sure that's all lubed up so that the O-rings go in nicely. Along with that, I'm just going to be taking an injector and squirting it on the end to get that O-ring nice and lubed up. So now I'm going to install the first injector, and with these tabs up that bolt down the fuel rail, you want to make sure that the electrical connection is down to that. So now when putting these in, we just want to be nice and slow and gentle. You don't want to rush it too much, otherwise you will mess up that O-ring. So I'm just going to work it in circles a little bit. It's kind of hard. You want to make sure you get all that O-ring in. There you go. Now that one is in all the way. So one thing to note is you actually can't use the original clips that go on here because the groove that are in these new injectors is actually towards the O-ring more. So when it's doing that, it's basically getting covered by this black piece. And if we were to put the clip on, the injectors would stick out too far and it wouldn't seat properly. But when we put this fuel rail back on the intake manifold, since it's going to be all bolted down, it should hold it nice in place. So nothing to worry about there. Alright, so I finally got all the injectors on the fuel rail. The last two were a little bit difficult because they had a little bit of surface rust just on the outer lip, so it's hard to get that O-ring to set in nicely. So I just took a little piece of sandpaper and just went along the perimeter on the edge a little bit and then washed it out with some WD-40 so it didn't contaminate the area. But now I got them all in and we're going to install it back into the Jeep. Alright, so back over here on the Jeep, I'm just going to clean out the ports a little bit on the intake manifold where the injectors go in. Just going to clean off any gunk that's in the holes with just a paper towel. And then once I clean off all of them, I'm going to take a little bit more of WD-40, spray it around in the holes and on the injector tips where the O-rings are. So that way it seals nicely on that. So now I'll install the rail back into place and I'll try to get underneath this wiring harness. So then I can find the holes and then we want to press evenly across all of them. Alright, so a tip to help get those injectors in is you want to put the bolts in for the fuel rail, one on each side, and slowly start tightening it up. And go along with each injector and just turn it back and forth a little bit, you know, loosen it up. That way, by turning it, it should help wiggle it into place. So now I got the fuel rail back in place, and now I'm just going to take all of our wire connections and plug them back in. And then we can also take our fuel line connection and plug it back into place. I'm also going to put a little bit of WD-40 on the tip here because there is an O-ring in there and want to go in nice and smoothly. And then it snaps right back into place. And then we can take our safety cap and push it back on. Alright, so now it's just basically putting everything back together the way we took it off. We got throttle cables. For me, I got the shroud, so I'm going to put that back on. And then vacuum hoses, and then we should be done. Alright, so I got my custom heat shield back in place, and I have the bolts for the fuel rail back in. So now we're just going to plug all the vacuum hoses that we disconnected back into place. And then we got this one. And lastly, we got our throttle cables. They got 2 screws going into the intake manifold. And then we can connect our throttle cables. Alright, so everything is back together, but before we start it up, there is a few things we have to do before that. And one of those is we have to disconnect the battery, and we have to make sure that we reset the ECU. So to do that, we can disconnect the battery and then touch the 2 positive and negative together. And that way it should help drain the capacitors that are in the ECU. And then while you're doing that, you can also turn on your headlights and turn your key in that your cluster lights, just all go on that way. That way it should help get rid of that memory setting that's in your ECU, so that when we start it, the computer can relearn the new injectors and properly tune them so that you're getting the best tune for your engine. But before I disconnect the battery, I'm actually just going to prime the fuel pump and check for any leaks. You want to make sure you do this, otherwise you could have possibly a fire underneath your hood. So you want to make sure you pressurize the system, don't start it right away. That way you can easily see if there's any gas coming out from any connections. Alright, so just checking around and seeing if there's any gas leaking out. But it looks like we're all good, so I'm going to go and reset the ECU right now. So I'm just going to start off on the negative terminal right here. And then we're also going to do the positive. Now actually, since my negative and positive terminals can't touch each other because the wire's kind of short, I'm just going to be taking a little piece of wire right here, touching it on this and on the positive, and I'm just going to hold it here for about 30 seconds. Alright, so now I'm just going to turn the ignition so that the cluster lights would come on, just a couple clicks, and then turn on the headlights to make sure everything is all the way drained. Alright, so now we can just reinstall our connection. Alright, so I'm going to go and start it up now. Another thing to note is that it could possibly take up to 50 times where you're having a rough start. It might do some weird things. That's just because the ECU needs to learn the new injectors, so it could take up to 50 times. That's what I've been told. so as you can see, it was running a little bit rough on first startup. I had to start a few times to actually get it running. And then I took it down the highway and it was running really choppy, almost like it had a misfire. So just in case, I used a scanner with me, a little Bluetooth one, and I was constantly refreshing the check engine light page and seeing if there was anything coming up, and nothing came up with any misfire. So I think all of our injectors are good, and that our ECU just needs to learn the new injectors. So just starting it up a few times, it seems like it's getting better, not as rough. And a couple times I actually had it where if I rev it, it wouldn't come down in RPM, it would high idle at like 1500. And I think it just needs to get used to it over time. So in the future, I'm going to be making a video on reviewing these injectors after I have driven the Jeep for a little bit and the ECU properly tunes itself. But that's it for this video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you learned something. And I will post a link in the description below on where you can find injectors for yourself. So please like and subscribe to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel and comment below if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer. Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.